1968, I was a State House reporter in Helena for the Great Falls Tribune. Well, the editor sent me to Butte to interview a madam who had operated two of the leading houses of prostitution. Butte was wide open, had 5 thriving brothels, and, surprise, legal gambling. As they say, Butte drinks their liquor straight. I first saw Butte in 1965. I was a young reporter driving from Colorado to a new job at the Missoula. I drove over old Pipestone Pass late at night. I wrote that in the book that in the distance, Butte was stunning, glittering with thousands of lights on the west side of the Continental Divide. So my nonfiction book about Butte is titled Montana's Dimple Knees Sex Scandal, 1960s Prostitution, Payoffs, and Politicians. The book was released a few days ago by my publisher, the History Press. So the book's about a love story that just went terribly wrong. Betrayal, violence, greed, and for some redemption. The book is based on an 8-part series about Butte that I wrote for the Great Falls Tribune half a century ago. About 75% is new material. The book took more than 4 years to write. I spent days going through deeds and coroner and court records in 3 counties, a lot of time looking at some very old files, collecting old photos, and reading old newspapers. All royalties will be paid directly by the publisher to the Butte Citizens for Preservation and Revitalization, which is working to save your amazing book. There really wouldn't be a book without Tracy Thornton, who dug out countless musty files and old photos from the morgue at the Montana Standard, and Walt Hinnick, who provided many of the photos. And of course, the Butte Silver Bowl Public Archives and Montana Historical Society were extremely helpful. I am indebted to former long-term Montana Congressman Pat Williams, a Butte native and a friend of mine, for the book's foreword. Pat describes the book as a well-researched look at Butte's underside. I guess that's probably about right. I just want to quickly show you 3 photos from the book's prologue. This is interesting. The prologue mentions the fires that took out major buildings in uptown Butte in the 1970s. And Tracy Thornton found this great photo. Firefighters are battling the Diana Hughes fire. Next door is Newman Butte. It was burned out at another location, and now, when the fire started, was advertising a fire sale. Hey, this is Ed's bathhouse. It's from a 1952 pinup calendar for Ed's bathhouse in Fintown and East Broadway. It offered saunas, but only on Saturdays. That's me back. This is me when I was 27 years old. I'm at 4,200 feet under Butte in the Stewart mine, writing a story about a new telephone system so miners could contact the surface. So I interviewed Madam Beverly Snodgrass in the office of Father Joseph Finnegan in Butte's Immaculate Conception Church, where she felt safe. Snodgrass told me she had been brutally beaten and run out of business when she stopped paying bribes to local officials. She said that only talking to give a boost to Butte's anti-vice groups. She tried several other newspapers to tell her story, only the Tribune would touch it. So I thought this was really a one-shot deal. You know, a quick trip to Butte, to interview the madam, write a story, and that would be the end of it. I found a much bigger story than I imagined. It would take on a life of its own, take over my life certainly, and become a major issue in the 1968 governor's race and other campaigns. Result in a credible threat against my life, and trigger Montana's last newspaper war. Beverly made a lot of poor choices. She quit her job as a waitress in Butte to make more money as a prostitute in a brothel at 14 South Wyoming Street, 2 blocks up the street from Butte High School. She later bought the whorehouse. Beverly was a good businesswoman. A few years later, she acquired the famous Windsor on Mercury Street. At some point, she began a torrid love affair with a prominent Butte official that she fondly called Dimple Knees, who stole her heart and then her money. After she stopped Payoffs, her house on Mercury Street was torched twice in 2 days. A few years later, there was a failed attempt to dynamite her first bordello on South Wyoming. So as Beverly put it, I guess you could say that I quit paying off and they burned me out. After I started interviewing the madam, it was clear that she knew much too much for her own good. Call me Bev, she said, everybody does. But Bev looked tired and abused as she nervously fingered the lace on her blue check dress. She was tall, dark hair, grew up in West Virginia. She spoke with a delightful southern twang. She seemed to be in her late 40s or early 50s. So if someone didn't know about Bev's line of work, they might think she was one of Father Finnegan's parishioners, there to discuss something like fall church bazaar. A few minutes into the interview, it was clear she was a madam who knew way too much for her own good. Bev said that business was good for several years. Then she kept making larger and larger payoffs to stay in business, and which were demanded by top politicians. Dimple Knees and his brother, Bill, the bag man to whom Beverly usually paid extortion money. Bev said she was going broke despite staying open 18 hours a day. For a while, Bev said she was happy in her work. And speaking about her prostitutes, she said, for many of them, it wasn't just a house, but more like a home. She encouraged the girls to join her in taking correspondence courses. And the girls studied during slack morning hours. So jilted by her lover, tired of payoffs and being mistreated, the madam hired a respected private detective, turned over her records, tax returns, photos, and sworn affidavits by some of her employees. The detective spent a year and compiled a chilling yet salacious Snodgrass report. One of my favorite parts of the report is when the detective and an associate were watching in the shadows just after New Year's Day in 1967, as Dimple Knees rode shotgun for his brother Bill, the bag man. Dimple Knees slowly drove his big maroon Pontiac up and down what was left of Cat House Road 7 times. Inside the Windsor, Bill was collecting Snodgrass's gross receipts, $1,000, $300 more than the usual monthly payoffs. Dimple Knees later met his brother in the nearby parking lot. Beverly Snodgrass told me that Dimple Knees stored his extortion money in the trunk of his Pontiac. You can find a copy of the Snodgrass report in the vertical files at the Butte Archives, along with copies of my Tribune series. Snodgrass' report is also archived at the Mansfield Library in Missoula. So after interviewing Bev, I returned several times to Butte, once staying at a motel a couple of blocks from here for nearly a week to interview politicians, cops, another madam, and some of Bev's relatives. So I bar hopped so I could write about flagrant illegal gambling and other violations. I can't remember if I expressed my bar hops. Among the photos I acquired was one from Bev's sister. The photo showed Dimple Knees standing in front of a Christmas tree and holding the madam's favorite lapdog, poodle, Suzette. Dimple Knees was dressed informally. He had on a tank top undershirt, blue boxer shorts, white polka dots, and black socks held up with garters. So, no surprise, the editors at the Tribune refused to print the photo. My God, we have some standards, said managing editor Des Fairlawn. But they would print a photo of Bev. She wore a tasteful white dress in front of the same Yuletide tree. The lead corporate attorney for the Minneapolis Star Tribune, which owned the Great Falls Tribune, cautioned the publisher against identifying Dimple Knees or naming other crooked officials because they had not been charged, or arrested or charged with a crime. Of course, some of the same officials who would arrest them were also involved in crime. So the entire series became a whodunit, though practically everybody in Butte knew who did it. Bev described in explicit detail how Dimple Knees would take her out on the flats near the Milwaukee road tracks or near the shooting range where they would have intense sex. Later she rented a love nest where they stayed, but Dimple Knees eventually moved back with his wife. Before that, her lover gave her an engagement ring and a wedding ring, which he said she hoped she could wear someday legally. After Dimple Knees moved out, Beverly Snodgrass said that the official rarely missed coming at night to the Windsor for yet more sex. They took trips using her money to whitefish. They played golf, made love deeply every night, toured Glacier Park that year and the following year. As a result of her tryst, she became pregnant and had an abortion, which was performed by 2 doctors in Butte. I finally finished my series, including an interview with Butte Mayor Tom Powers. He said that Butte wanted prostitution and gambling. His honor's take on the houses of prostitution was that if you closed them, the cops would have to chase the prostitutes down the streets. There was a lot of illegal gambling, and so many punch boards in some bars that you sometimes had to rearrange them to put down a drink. Police chief told me he didn't know of any gambling in Butte, including at the Board of Trade. A rather big gambling den a few doors down from the chief's office in City Hall. So on the road, Beat Generation writer Jack Kerouac spent a night in Butte in the 1950s. He wrote, "I walked the sloping streets, super below zero weather. It was Saturday night, and I hoped the saloons would stay open long enough to see them. They never closed." If Jack had returned to Butte in 1968, he would have found that not much had changed. Some bars only closed for an hour or two so they could be swamped out. I don't know if there's still speakeasies in Butte, like the one I visited in 1986 about 3 a.m. with some Butte friends who got off work at 12:30 a.m. This was the sort of place that had no signs, the door open on an alley. You knock on the door, the bartender opens a slit in the door, eyeballs you, and if you look okay, lets you in. When I finally left, the bar was full of drinkers. I asked the bartender why he stayed open so late. He said, "I just like to see people drink." After the series was sent to the Tribune, after the series was sent to the Tribune's corporate attorney in Minneapolis, he responded many billable hours later with a long memo. So I went back to Butte again in the fall to find answers to the lawyer's questions. The first article in the series was printed by the Tribune on page 1, October 13, 1968. Here it is. The Tribune was the closest thing to a statewide newspaper. Before the series began, its colorful publisher, Bill Cordingley, had teasers placed on hundreds of news racks around the state, promising that next Sunday there would be an expose about Butte gambling and prostitution. The publisher hired another delivery truck to haul an extra 4,500 copies of the Tribune every day to Butte during the series, and went to the loading dock late at night to be sure they were on the papers, on the truck, and headed to Butte. The third article in the series was headlined, "Butte Madam Describes Love Affair with Politician Dimple Knees." So I was in the Hell in a Beer bar that night buying drinks for friends after I cashed a $100 check, bonus check from the Tribune's publisher. You know, $100 bucks was a lot of money in those days, and beer was cheap. The phone rang behind the bar, and the bartender asked if I wanted to talk to some guy from the governor's office. So it was Governor Tim Babcock's campaign manager, who used to be a newsman. And he said, "The governor wants to see you now." And I said, "At 8 at night?" "Now means now," he insisted. So I thought, uh-oh. What story did I write that the governor didn't like enough to track me down to a bar in Helen? The only lights on in the east wing of the Capitol were in the governor's suite. Tim Babcock rose from behind his desk. There was no color in his face. So if you ever knew Tim Babcock, he was a man of few words, and he got right to the point. "They're going to get you, John," the governor said. "They're coming from Butte to kill you. That's all I can tell you. Good luck." So, what do you do? I went home and began sharing my bed with a loaded shotgun. 2 weeks later, nothing had happened, and I stopped sleeping with the shotgun. You know, I don't know why, but I still look over my shoulder when I'm in Butte. As the series continued to be bannered on the front page of the Tribune, the story took on a life of its own. Babcock was running for another term, opposed by Democratic attorney Forrest Anderson, a very slick politician whose nickname was the Silver Fox. They soon tangled over the issue of Butte vice. Babcock said he wanted to clean up Butte but had no authority. He said this was Anderson's job. Anderson had no plans to sanitize Butte, despite his oversight over county attorneys, including the one from Silverwood. The two candidates spent the weeks before the November election issuing news releases attacking each other over the issue of Butte vice with copies to the news media. So all this didn't go unnoticed by the Montana Standard, and they soon attacked the Tribune and Governor Babcock on its editorial pages. In one editorial headline, "Why Our Butte?" the Standard wrote, "We deploy the whinings of a wielding whore which had become a political issue in the Montana gubernatorial race. That Tim Babcock has injected himself in a local problem as part of his vote seeking." The Standard said, "The Tribune has fallen into yellow journalism and smeared Butte." It said the Tribune bent the hallowed guidelines of responsible journalism to make a buck. So that's Beverly Snodgrass. The anti-vice leaders continued to criticize the county attorney, police chief, and the mayor. This wasn't the first campaign against vice in Butte. And that's Beverly's leading house of Prostitution, the Windsor. And you'll notice, I think that's quite a hoot.
Yeah,
In front there's a sign that says free parking.
Yeah.
So the book also has a chapter titled Butte Boosters. There have been many of them over the years. So here's one of them. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm sorry, that was another one that went with the Beverly Snodgrass segment of my talk. So there's the Butte High Marching Band in Wyoming Street. Just up to the right, there's a small brick building with a railing around it. And that's Beverly, a house Beverly later acquired at 14 South Wyoming. The photo was taken in the 40s and 50s and came from the Butte archives. So here's, as far as boosters, here's the Salvation Army band. And to the left is the sign that says, it was in a strategic location. To the left is a sign that says Follies. And just up the street is Walker's Bar, that advertised that during Prohibition it was the only place in America that served draft beer over the bar. Sorry. So Tim Babcock lost the governor's race for us. And this is Father Finnegan talking about Butte boosters. A little out of sequence, sorry. He was one of the leading anti-vice crusaders in Butte. And there is Bob Knievel. No, Bob always had a kind of a reputation as being a really tough guy. And this is taken late in Bob's life, and he's holding a poodle. The photo is by Walt Hennig. I did Bob's profile in 1968 for the Tribune, and the stuntman discussed his early years of crime in Butte. He said that the public had a distorted image of safe crackers. Bob said that when cracking a safe, most people think you just get up and kind of fiddle with the dial. Hell, he said, you just get a chisel and go at it. I can open any safe in 2 minutes. So, Tim Babcock lost the election for us. I'm sorry, that's another Butte booster, and that's William Clark, one of the richest men in America. And he's standing in front of a log cabin. He was born in a log cabin in Pennsylvania, and this was in his later years. Okay. Somewhere, photo, there it is. Hi, that's Tim Babcock and his wife Betty. They're in a car, buckled up. They're doing a promotion for wearing seat belts. That's in the era before shoulder belts. Now here, the next is a photo of Governor Anderson. Look closely at the photo. So the Montana Historical Society copied this image from the back of the 1971 state highway map, showing Forrest Anderson after he was governor. And it illustrated a story I wrote. I was doing on my spare time writing an outdoor column for the Tribune. So Forrest is netting a frozen trout taken out of the freezer for the occasion. So to be featured on the state highway map.
That is funny.
You know, talk about fake news. So Missoula received collateral damage from the series in the Tribune. The result was an expose in the Missoulian reporting that illegal gambling was a $20 million a year industry, not pastime, but industry in Missoula County. In Helena, where a popular brothel known as Big Dorothy's wouldn't be abated until 1973, the Independent Record editorialized during the Butte series that in Butte and elsewhere unlawful activities, be it prostitution, gambling, or after-hours drinking, cannot exist openly unless the officials are taking payoffs. The record wrote, it's just that in Butte, not only don't they care, they're kind of proud of it. So Butte Mayor Powers lost the next municipal election to so-called reform mayor Mike McConey. And Mike told me in 2015 that in fact there was limited prostitution and gambling during his time in office, and that punch boards in the bars were impossible to get rid of. So, resolved the election, we had 1968 a new Attorney General, Bob Whittle, who was a certifiable nut. with way too much time in his hands. Too much energy. So he selected Anaconda as his first anti-vice target. And dozens of punch boards and other gambling devices were seized in 1979 in Anaconda. And after that, he also threatened to raid the legislature because of Super Bowl football pools, which he regarded as a great evil. So here's a punch board. And I had quite a time trying to find it. I called a bunch of people in Butte, no, they didn't have any punch boards. And so I was looking for this punch board, and I called the Montana Historical Society. So a day later, they took me down into the catacombs where they have reportedly more than 1 million objects stored. And they showed me a whole table heaped with punch boards. And this one I chose for the book because it was seized from Anaconda's Park Bar during Woodall's first raid in 1969. The last chapter of the book, titled Requiem, discusses the deaths of Powers, Snodgrass, Dimple Knees, and his brother Bill the Bagman, who extorted money from Butte Madams. Like the Tribune series, the book is a whodunit, but the book identifies Dimple Knees in the last sentence of Requiem. As for Bill the Bagman, Dimple Knees' brother, his body was found in 1970 in a hot pool at the Ranch Hotel outside Boulder. The death certificate, signed by the coroner, a mortician from Whitehall, listed accidental drowning as the cause of death. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. Sure.
Wow.
Bev turned her life around. She attended college, and she was a counselor at a state institution in the Seattle area. She died in 1987 when she was 65. So, that's it. I'd be happy to answer questions, and I'll stay at the table afterwards if anyone has copies of the book that will be sold by the Butte Archives for me to sign. Questions? Sure.
Was Beverly Snodgrass associated with Ruby Garrett? Were they before or after each other, or how?
Yeah. Answer is yes.
They worked in the same?
The house at 14 South, Wyoming, had been operated by Ruby and her husband, Ronnie, and for years. And her husband was at a bar at the Board of Trade watching four men play cards. When Ruby came in, and she had just gone down the street to buy a gun, and she shot her husband 5 times, including once in the heart. And so, as a result, the house went on the market, and Beverly, that's how it bought it. By the way,
Did she go to prison for that?
she did,
Yeah.
very short term. But while she was jailed before her trial, she thought her husband's funeral was in Dillon, where he was from, and Ruby thoughtfully sent flowers for the funeral.
Wow.
Yes, there's another question.
That picture that you have of the Boucher Clothier's sign on the side of the building,
Right.
showing the fire, was there any relationship between that building and prostitution, or is that just for the fire sale joke sign that you picked that?
No, I don't think there's any relationship that I know of. I talked to Tracy Thornton, who knows just about everything at the Montana Standard. She just said that was her favorite fire photo. She was right. I have been thinking more in terms of illustrating the book, a photo of one of the spectacular fires, like the J.C. Penney fire. But I thought this was a little more fun. I guess it was not fun, it was fire. Yes.
I have a little follow-up to your locations by Butte High School. I came back from New York in 1968 after 8 years and started teaching at Butte High School. I kind of forgot everything I learned back in my high school days, I guess, about 14 South and all of the interesting buildings in that area. And so I was doing Latin roots one day and came upon trans. The trans, you know, it means either through or across. And there's a door right up in the copper block there that says, Hotel, transients preferred. And my entire class, and mostly the guys, just erupted. They'd be flowing right through.
I'll tell you another quick story about 14 South, Wyoming. Beverly's sold, well, real estate company repossessed the house after Beverly Snodgrass left Butte for her health and went back to West Virginia before moving west again. And Ellen Crane, the director of the archives, told me that Bev left something behind. One of her favorite poodles had been buried under one of the trees, the old pine tree, at 14 South, Wyoming. And Beverly went all out. She went to a mortician in Butte and bought a baby's casket for the dog. And I like to think that the poodle is still there. Sure.
John,
Yes, Judge.
do you think the statewide publicity about device gambling had any impact on later initiatives then to try to legalize gambling throughout Montana? Obviously, you kept covering all those stories.
You know, I really have no idea. The reason gambling was legalized was that the 1972 Constitutional Convention had a separate proposition on the ballot. So you could vote on whether to legalize gambling. And I believe another one, you could legalize capital punishment. And when people in Butte voted in 1972, they voted down the Constitution, which was passed by a really slim margin. More than 70% of them voted for legalized gambling. Yes.
So who was Dimple Knees?
You'll have to. Someone, a couple people said you should buy the book.
He told us where to find it in here.
Anything else?
I know Dimple Knees' granddaughter, I'm gonna give her
Yes.
Were you serious?